Welcome everybody. So I would like to talk a little about GUI testing. First about where I work, where I sometimes contribute on blog posts, and I do a lot of open source from time to time. And going back to topic is like GUI testing have been abused in many times. There are many different opinions about them. It's like listening to the haters, but very often it's good to listen to them because if you listen to them carefully, you got the point, what is the real issue. So they say it in many different ways. Sometimes try to educate people to think about tests in a little different way, to understand the difference between them and the value that they comes. And this mostly have a common meaning is that the GUI testing are very different from the unit testing. You are no more doing a single call method testing, but you have a lot of dependencies. And if you switch it in the two dimensions, like the integration part and also this acceptance test part, then you are even more complicated which write when and how. To get to the point why this testing is so different is like to get how this architecture of application looks. It's very simplified here, but still we know that we have few different elements that have to play all together to make system works. And we also know that there's not too many systems that work only within one user. There's multiple users, and very often state of the system depends on who do what in what sequence. And when we are trying to write tests, acceptance tests within this, we have to take this into account. So when I look at how the testing architecture look like, it's pretty complex for this type of test, because you have some script that executed, you have some DSL from Capybara by driver to typical way, like the rack tests have full functionality inside. But if you take Selenium or WebKit, then you have to go through external process of browser and maintain also the database connection, database state, third-party services. That from one of the hand you would like to have the real data, real response, but when testing, you also want to have some kind of caching here to make this test work faster from one point, and also not to abuse the APIs that for the services that you use. So the one thing that is probably new for most of you here is like this chameleon above the Capybara way. And the story about chameleon, this DSL and abstraction to make writing tests, GUI tests that imitate user behavior. It have roots like a year ago on one of the Drug meeting that we were talking a lot about testing. I was like to present Cucumber, but I know that guys from Wrocław are haters of Cucumber. So I have to get what they are using to learn this, to get used to it, to be able to make a relevant discussion with them here. So this was like we take off from Cucumber back to Ruby and trying to find how to write this test in Ruby, still readable, maintainable, that bring the value for us. There's also one other tool that probably also have roots in those discussions, like barbecue. So when looking at this chameleon, it not override any method from Capybara. it just gives some extension for it. You can still call any Capybara method, but this method that are implemented in Chameleon make it more robust to writing this test. The only two methods that share the same namespace. So if you want to execute method from Capybara, you need to call it directly on this Capybara session. Okay, so what you can do with Chameleon? There's really 5 methods that we have implemented. The first is click. It's a very sophisticated action that users do very often. And we use this click on. So it doesn't matter, it's a link, it's a button. And allow to click on text, allow to chain clicks within one call, support for some pop-ups, for clicking image or any element. So it allow us to chain this clicks, whatever we are doing within some sequence at once. The next one are forms. It's like filling value into label, into some inputs. And in Capybara, it's a little mixed because sometimes it's like you fill within field with value, and sometimes value within a field. And we have unified like this, so we always put the value as a first. So we put value within the field. And it's also allowed to chain multiple fields to fill in fields at once. Similar as with checkboxes, the one checkbox or multiple at once. Checking, unchecking. Radio buttons. There is no something like unchoose, of course, but because there is no such an action that user can do within the browser. The selects. There's also, you can pass as hash which value you want to choose from which select. And also chain more than one in the one method call. Unselect is very similar. Attaching files, the same semantic. So we only use this relevant part of file to put it into field. And the rest is just a configuration that is set where we are storing this assets for testing. And it is also allowed to use to attach more than one file within it. Okay, next one is what users see and can judge that is present in the page. The simple one is the text. Of course, you can check more than one text in one call. Same links. So one link as a text or link within the URL or multiple URL links at once. Images, it looks by the alt attribute or by the source of the attribute of the image tag. And now looking into the values that are set in fields. And this is very similar with fill in. We just use C value within the field. C and then able to chain more checks within whenever it's possible to make it not require you to write all the time C, C, C. Judging that there are fields on page. If the field is empty, it's present on the page, but have no set value. And same with all other forms, types like checkboxes. And this is same with radio buttons. With selects, to just verify if this value is really selected within it. And also support the multi-select. As opposite is the value that's unselected, also within a multi-select. Very often when there are written tests, we need to verify the order of things that are appear on the page. And there are many different ways that you can describe it. For us, the simplest way was just to put an array and verify that it's really present. Under the hood, it just prepare a specific XPath and take all these values from the page and compare these two arrays. Sometimes useful is also to judge how many elements of specific types are present in the page. And this can be by CSS, by full XPath, or by custom selector that Capybara support from some time. The opposite is to not see something. There's not as rich as see, because it's usually better to check if something is present on the page, that there is no presence of this. But sometimes it's useful. So basic text, fields, it really doesn't matter what type of field it is. It just the field isn't present. Link, images. Next thing that when I was showing this architecture is like multi-user platforms. So it's good to have easy way to switch within us who we would like to perform action now. And Capybara support multi-session from about around here. Okay, and we usually don't think about sessions. If we use one session, there's name default, and changing the session really change anything. But when we start doing multi-session testing, then the first visit is using this default session, but we create explicit session, we visit login, and we can switch to session within a blog or globally, and perform action within this session. Okay, so how this looks in the real tests. This is an example from Spree. It's very readable, and it's funny to find what this integration tests really do. And it's do very simple thing. It just verify that the elements are present in the proper order, but doing it in very complex way. In Chameleon, it can be done within this part of code. So we are abstracting and hiding a little complexity, making the test more readable and more maintainable, of course. And we compare this to this is also much less text that we need to write. Another example, this is also taken from Spree. We repeat very often fill in, fill in, fill in. And here on this example, we can see that in fill in, we do within field, we fill value. And within select, we do value into the field. So this is in Capybara is a little mixed. And if you look at the same example within Chameleon, we don't repeat ourselves to call some kind of method many times. We just pass a group of arguments that do exactly the same, but makes the code more readable. Here's another one. And within a Chameleon is just much more shorter. We don't do like, when you verify that some text is present, we don't write the page should have a content. We just write C and pass all the arguments that we want to verify within it. And this makes tests very improve the readability, as I mentioned a few times, and maintainability. Here's also a funny thing, because when you look at this long test, you don't really know what they are doing for the first side. And when you hide some elements within it, this is allowed to just show what we are doing within what scope, and that we are checking which cell of the table have what value. And here is also the same, but this full XPath is repeated many times. Okay, I have some video recorded from one acceptance test that we written using this way. Then we would go through each step of this test. Not sure if it's readable enough. But this is like starting two sessions. One is like admin, the second one is a casual user. And there's very often would be switching between windows and manipulating elements, waiting on time when user can post a message and posting some proposals. Then admin goes back, makes some of them favorites. When the proposals mark favorites, then user can rate them and comment them. After they are rated, admin is able to choose which one would be taken as the winner for the contest. And at the end, uploading images that will be shown. And the user verify that they are really present. And when we go through the source code, that script that rule this test is work with this full DSL of Chameleon. It's like creating session, switching to signing as proper role, creating another session, also signing as. And then there is a lot of switching between this, who is active now. First, as a user, we check the state of the system. Then, as an admin, creating a new contest. When the contest is created, we travel within time to 5 seconds before. We load page as a user. We wait until the page is reloaded and change the state and verify that this is working properly. Then we travel with time once again, within the time that we are able to fill in all these proposals, and summing few of them. Then switching back as the admin and marking some of those as favorites. Then going back as a user and posting a rating for each of the proposal. Assign as comments. Then we are traveling at the end of the contest, and as an admin, we are choosing this that would be a winner for this. In this particular example is HTML, Python, like this. Then we are switching back as a user, verifying that it have an impact of the part of the page. There is visible of gallery, and he see which one was chosen, which are not present on this list, even if they were favorites. And as an admin, uploading these images for galleries, and also verifying as a user they are present, and so on with another type of gallery. And this is pretty long scenario. If you look at this, it's like 150 lines. But this is acceptance test that verify that system serve the business value and the business goal. If this test pass, it means that system can do this part, this core of the implementation, because it's taken from one system that we did a few weeks ago, but I have changed how this looks like, but the idea of the test is exactly the same. And this is basically Chameleon. So this is the 5 methods that allow to write this test within a much more robust manner. How to configure as Chameleon is dependencies are like distributed as a gem, and the only 2 files that need to be loaded is the Chameleon and Chameleon RSpec all, if you want to all stuff that is loaded, or just the DSL. So this garbage collector and the headless configuration is optional because it's not dependent by default. Shared DB connection, there's simple trick for that. I have examples for Spork and when you're not using Spork, how to make it working properly. Headless allow to get rid of the Firefox window from our desktop when running tests. And the nice one is a RIP. Because of the specific of how these tests are executed, especially the time that is needed to run the test, very often fixing something and running tests again takes a lot of time. So whenever some error occur, we just stopping execution within the same binding running ERB, so we are able to debug what is the status of the system, including database, if we do it properly before that transaction have been rolled back, and all the elements and data that is within test, because we are exactly in the same binding. And this allows to debug problems much easier and much faster. And also we can even manipulate what the browser do, because we are full injected ERB in the state of when there's some test fail. Okay, thank you.
Do you have some questions, maybe?
Yeah. Do you cover your whole application with those acceptance tests?
Yes, I have about, I call it more integration test for this. And there's like 100 of, you're asking about application, about this library, because maybe I... Application. We cover huge part of application within this test.
How do you deal with brittleness? Because obviously, though this kind of tests are brittle because you have hard-coded those strings, those copywriting, and so on. Well, it's not possible to do it other way. And wherever copywriting changes, you have to update those tests. So how do you deal with brittleness?
With one of the systems that we did it as the first way, we didn't use text, but we use keys for translations. Within test, we have it implemented. This is not in Camel so far, but it was detecting that the string that you pass looks like a key for international or that string. If it looks like a key, it looks for translation and use translation within the browser. And this is how we have solved this, that very often translations are changing. Yes?
No. How long does it take to run the full suite for application?
It takes the time. It takes, for the very big application, it's sometimes more than an hour to build full suite.
How many examples?
Around 500, because there's not only acceptance tests with this size, but there's a lot small integration tests. So there's no, all of these examples 150 lines long. Because this is what I show is like this acceptance test, but when I'm talking about this number, it's also including this all integration tests, small parts.
So, what was the primary reason for printing Camel? What's the thing that you didn't like in other libraries, like barbecue? Because one simple question: do you have something like session tool, for example, if you come around, and it really, because I suspect that you don't, maybe you do. But I think that if we split our resources into yet another DSL to integrate with browsers, then we miss, as the team that writes barbecue, we miss the nice things that you did, and you miss the nice things that we did. So
Yes.
we might have better performance, we might have better API, why not, no, why not build one thing that's cool?
The first solution, how it was built, it was very, we started working, and you started working on barbecue mostly in the same time. And after a period of few weeks, it was not even named as Chameleon. We just used it in one project, and this wasn't distributed as any open source library or stuff like this. And we were working like this for a very long time. I don't see that we cannot join these solutions, but
So it's already a few years old, yes?
no, this is like the way that we were changing this DSL is something that we started last year. And we have this one project, and from the beginning of the year, I start extracting it to the open source library. The way how we solve some problems there. From one thing is that barbecue was more low level without changing API, unobtrusive for this type. So it's like more handling sessions and stuff like this very well. So there's two different concepts. There is possible to join them, no problem with this.
Did you run it on the Specjure
Specjure.
or any kind of parallel testing?
This particular example not, but there was one of the project that we have this parallel test. Of course, require then a separate database for each of the parallel execution, and we have like three times faster running this test. Yes, this is thing that solves in some case the delay for getting the full build. But now I'm more focusing to finish this DSL, and because parallel execution is just distribute tests across few processes, so it don't really have impact of the library like Chameleon at all.
Actually, the Specjure can distribute your test across the network, which is very
I didn't use it so far, but we looked at this. Okay.
Talking about DSL design, what's the point of having one method that takes a hash with different set of keys instead of having just different methods? Besides, of course, the much harder way to document it, because you have 5 methods and the user just sees, oh, there's a fill-in method. Now I have to dig deeper, maybe in the source code, to check all the keys. What's the point?
Yes, from documenting point of view, yes, it's correct. I agree with it. But it's like these hashes have the same structure. Whatever you do C, you do fill in. It's a very part of the way of defining share across these methods. And what is real nice about this is like when you, for me, an example, when you fill in form, that you are able to call one method that you are filling form, because forms are very easily translated into hash, because it's just like you within the labels you put values, within labels you put values, and this is what for me is stuff that I like. Yes?
Well, okay, but you have to explicitly write the select key. So it could be like just those 4 lines, fill in.
Yes.
And just make it select as a method and then hash without even the brackets.
Yes, but for me this looks much more readable than executing or writing down few times fill in, because you are repeating yourself line by line. It's like in this example, your readability is much lower than when you do it in that way, from my perspective.
Yeah, okay, I see the point with multiple values, even a single method.
Yeah.
It's nice, but my point is that you can't fill in, like, it won't automatically discover is it the input field, the text area, or checkbox.
But it doesn't need to.
It's check and select keys. So from my perspective, what's the point of having like manual dispatch of these keys rather than use just Ruby methods?
Is probably the way of style that you are writing code, I think. Because what really Camaleon do is like dispatching this, because in the end, I call the same methods that the Capybara do, line by line. And if you have this 150 lines example, the readability is very important. Even more than with this kind of short example. And this is my main goal when designing this DSL.
Okay, one last question.
He also says that Camaleon is built upon a Capybara, yeah?
Yeah.
So it should be no problems to run it inside a Cucumber. No.
Yes, there's no problem.
No issues, no. You just add some method and it's possible to use them without any fear.
Could you repeat this last part?
Okay, so it should be no integrational collisions between.
Yeah. This is like I showed that you can call each Capybara method. So within this, the only way is that so far the integration is only with airspace. So like Cucumber use airspace from what I remember by default is not a problem. Just you add one more layer of text and parsing this regex with calling this method. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I see that you have more questions to Michał, so please catch him.